On November 9th, the Indianapolis Colts picked up their 8th win of the season to move to 8-2, and their playoff chances rose to 99%. They would go on to lose the next 7 games and miss the playoffs. This is a story of one of the worst collapses in NFL history. The Indianapolis Colts went into the 2025 season with lots of mixed emotions. They didn't know who the starting quarterback was going to be, whether it was going to be Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. They had uncertainty really at most places, and you looked at a lot of people's predictions. Like, I had the Colts going 2-15. Some people had them maybe sneaking into the playoffs as a division winner, because that AFC South also had a lot of uncertainty. So when they announced Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback, people had seen him in New York for the Giants, and they said, you know what, the Colts are probably going to miss the playoffs this year. And when they got out in their week 1 game against the Dolphins, they won by a score of 33-8. And everyone was like, okay, it was the Dolphins though. And a lot of people also had a lot of uncertainty about the Dolphins. You know, we've seen them make the playoffs in 2023, but then last year, they weren't that good. And this year, we didn't know what we were going to get out of the Dolphins. And so when the Colts beat the Dolphins, everyone was like, okay, but that's just the Dolphins, so we'll see next week. And then they went to Denver, and they played Denver at home the next week. And people were like, okay, Denver was a playoff team last year. They'll probably be in the playoffs this year. Most people were predicting them to win the AFC West over the Chiefs. And they go out there and they have a 1-point win. Yes, it was a close game rather than the blowout they had last week against Miami. But everyone, including me, was like, okay, the Colts are probably a fraudulent team. And, they've probably had 2 lucky wins. That win against Denver was especially lucky. And then they had the Titans the next week. The Titans, they had a rookie quarterback. They were bad. They rolled through the Titans by a score of 41-20. Then they went into Los Angeles, and everyone was like, okay, this will be the Colts' best test yet. Los Angeles has been in the playoffs for the last couple of years. They won the Super Bowl in 2021. This is a great team that can be consistent year in and year out. So, just as most people expected, the Colts lost this game. They moved to 3-1 on the season. Still pretty good in the upper class of the AFC. Then they went to the Raiders. Raiders, bad team. We saw that as the year went on. They beat the Raiders by a score of 40-6. Then they went to the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a pretty bad team, but they only won by a score of 31-27 to move to 5-1. And at this point, everyone's like, okay, Jonathan Taylor's on track to have one of his best seasons ever. Daniel Jones could have a run like he did in, I believe, 2023, where he leads the Giants to the playoffs and wins a playoff game. He's having a very similar season to that. People are even talking about Daniel Jones in the MVP race at this point, based on the season he's having and what he's done to turn that Colts franchise around. Then they go to the Chargers the next week. Chargers, another team that made the playoffs last year and really in that fight for the AFC West title. They go and they beat the Chargers by 14 points by a score of 38-24. And then they go on to the Titans again. That's a win. They're all of a sudden 7-1 and at the top of the AFC. And everyone's like, the Colts have a legit shot at winning the Super Bowl this year. Daniel Jones, like I said, is playing like an MVP. Jonathan Taylor's having one of his best seasons ever. They have a breakout rookie tight end in Tyler Warren. This Colts team is looking very, very good. Then, at the deadline, we're not to the deadline yet, but we'll get there. Wait, we might be at the deadline. Yeah, we're at the deadline. So, then at the trade deadline, they go get Sauce Gardner from the Jets. They give up a couple first-round picks to do it. But everyone's like, this Colts team just had a major addition. And if they're going to really go far, that's a key addition to help them make that Super Bowl run. Then they go out to the Steelers in Week 9. And they lose that game by a score of 27-20. And Jonathan Taylor only had 45 yards rushing. And although Daniel Jones threw for 342 yards, it wasn't enough to get the win over Aaron Rodgers. And the Steelers have been a team that is in the playoffs consistently every year, but they squeak into the playoffs. So the Steelers, that wasn't exactly the loss that made them have that collapse, but it was on their way to it. So now they sit at 7-2, and they're still like, Colts fans are like, okay, we're fine. We're good. It's okay. Then they have a really big win in Germany in overtime, 31-25 against the Falcons. Jonathan Taylor has one of his best games of his career, has 244 yards. Daniel Jones just has another consistent passing performance where he hasn't thrown under 200 yards passing in a game ever this season. Jonathan Taylor, like I said, having one of his best games ever and best seasons ever, has rushing games of, in week 1, 71, 165, 102, 76, 66, 123, 94, 153, 45, and 244. And everyone's like, okay, Jonathan Taylor's already at like 1,100 yards. He's at like 15 touchdowns. Oh my gosh, he's going to run away with Offensive Player of the Year. And Daniel Jones may be getting MVP with what he's done. Then they have their bye week. And little did they know that before that bye week in Germany, that would be their last win of the season. They still with Daniel Jones. They would go into Kansas City sitting at 8-2, and they would leave at 8-3 after a 23-20 loss in overtime to the Chiefs. Daniel Jones threw for under 200 yards passing for the first time that season. Jonathan Taylor went for under 100 yards for only the second. No, just kidding. Jonathan Taylor went for under 75 yards for only the second time. Fourth time that season. And their leading receiver only had 48 yards. Then they went to the Texans, a huge divisional matchup if they want to keep Houston out of the playoffs. Houston started 3-5, but had won the last 3 games. So they go in there and they lose to drop to 8-4. Daniel Jones only threw for 201 yards. Jonathan Taylor rushed for 85 yards, and their leading receiver only had 78 yards. Then they go to Jacksonville, another huge game. They're 8-4 heading into the Jacksonville game, and they know that they have to win this to keep their playoff chances alive. Because keep in mind, after that win against Atlanta, their playoff chances were at 99%, and they just had to win 1 or 2 more games to get into the playoffs and lock their spot in. And they go into Jacksonville, and they lose by a score 36-19. But the bigger problem, Daniel Jones, season-ending Achilles tear. All of a sudden, Daniel Jones out of the MVP race. Jonathan Taylor has 74 yards. Their leading receiver, Alec Pierce, only 80 yards. Riley Leonard comes in the game and only throws 145 yards. And it wasn't enough. They dropped to 8-5. Then they go to Seattle. They sign Phillip Rivers during the week, hoping that they can have him resurrect this team after 3 straight losses at this point. They go out against a very tough Seattle defense, and they only lose by a score of 18-16 to drop to 8-6. Rivers only throws 120 yards passing, but Jonathan Taylor does pretty good with 87 yards, but their leading receiver only has 32 yards. So they're 8-6, still very much in the playoff conversation. And keep in mind, at this same time, Jacksonville has won like 5 straight games. Houston has won like 5 straight games. And Houston's 8-5. Jacksonville's like 8-4, 9-4. And so at this point, they've lost their division lead, and their playoff chances have dropped tremendously. Then, San Francisco the next week, a tough time. They lose 48-27 to drop to 8-7 on the season. Rivers throws for 277 yards passing. Jonathan Taylor only does 46 yards, and Alec Pierce goes for 86 receiving yards. And they're 8-7. And at this point, Houston is at probably 9-5. They've jumped them for the Houston's 10-5. They've jumped them for the playoff spot. They're on the outside looking in. They need some help. Then they go to Jacksonville with Phillip Rivers this time. Keep in mind, last time they played Jacksonville, Daniel Jones tore his Achilles. Luckily, Phillip Rivers doesn't tear his Achilles, but they do lose 23-17, making them 8-8. Keep in mind, at one time, this Colts team was 8-2. Rivers throws for only 147 yards, Taylor only for 70 rushing yards, and Tyler Warren is their leading receiver with only 43. Then, in the final game of the regular season, they're already eliminated from the playoffs. And they start Riley Leonard, and they lose 38-30. He throws 270 yards. Their leading rusher only has 30 yards, but Alec Pierce has 132 yards receiving. So they kept in line with that Texans defense, but that was one of the biggest collapses you will ever see. Going from a 99 playoff percent chance at 8-2 to finishing 8-9 and losing 7 straight games to make your playoff chances 0. And if you look at the season stats, Daniel Jones at the time was playing out of his mind. He had 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns to 8 interceptions when he went down. And I think that if he was able, would he have competed with Matthew Stafford and Drake May, which is the current MVP race? I don't think so. But could he have? If he had more and maybe had a couple more breakout games, yes. Phillip Rivers in his time there threw 544 yards, 4 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And in 7 games, I guess in like 5 games that Phillip Rivers started, if you only score 4 touchdowns, you're not going to win many games. And that's just flat out what happened. You have Riley Leonard, who came in there for that one game, and he throws, I guess he came in when Daniel Jones was hurt, and in the final game, he throws a total of 415 passing yards. He throws 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, so not too much better. Jonathan Taylor, looking at it, like we said, he was on track to pretty much get the rushing title, get Offensive Player of the Year, and he, actually looking at the stats, he had a great season, but it just wasn't enough. Like, if we pull it up, he was 3rd in rushing with 1,585, and he was 1st in touchdowns with 18. So he still kept the touchdown title, but he just had so many good performances on the front part of the season that in the back you see those 45-yard performances, 60-yard performances, 50-yard performances that he just didn't have enough to make it to the end. And I guess if you're Colts fans, do you go with Daniel Jones next year? Because you have the pieces. You have one of the league's best rushers in Jonathan Taylor. Maybe you need a wide receiver one. You have your tight end of the future in Tyler Warren. You have a good defense with Sauce Gardner and all those people. But, morale has to be low after starting 8-2 and finishing 8-9. What a collapse. Maybe the biggest collapse in NFL history, to go from 99% chance to make the playoffs to 0 in 7 weeks. Comment below if you have a better collapse than that. Maybe I'll make a video about it. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.